Using a 10mm ratchet or ratchet wrench, socket, whatever you want to use. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the battery terminals. Pull those off and just set them aside. We're then going to go ahead and loosen the battery hold down clamp using 10mm socket. I'm just going to loosen those, and then we're going to go ahead and pull the J bolts out from underneath. I'm going to grab the battery and pull that out. I'm going to go ahead and pull this tray out, set that aside. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and press down on this tab, wiggle that off, press these tabs out, and pull this harness off to the side. Now I'm going to go ahead and pop these little retainer tabs off, lift up, and pull out. Next, reach in, grab your air filter. Set that aside. Using a 10mm ratchet, we're going to go ahead and start removing the bolts here that secure the box. There's one here and there's one in the back. Now we're using a 10mm and a swivel socket with some extensions to go ahead and loosen that back bolt. And I'll reach down in there and pull that out. I'm going to go ahead and use a Phillips head on this clamp right here. I'm going to go ahead and remove the ECU, just kind of set it up. So there's a 10mm bolt here, and then there's two right here. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull this box out. I'm going to pull off this front intake tube. I'm going to start by pulling the rubber grommet off of the mounting stud here. We did use a little bit of penetrating lube on there to make it easy to come off, so I'm going to work that. And now we're going to go ahead and pull the intake box out of the intake tube and this rubber vent port up top, like so. And we're just going to try and manipulate this box out of place. So now we're underneath the vehicle. We're going to use a regular jack and a block of wood, and we're going to gently bring up the jack, and we're going to apply just a little bit of pressure just to that transmission. We're not going to jack up the vehicle, we just want to hold that transmission in place. And we're going to use a 14mm, we're using a box wrench on this, and we're going to get this bolt right here. right, now with that bolt broken, we switched over to a 14mm ratchet wrench. Just makes it that much easier to get in there. There's not enough room for a socket and a ratchet, so we're just doing this here. You might get to a point where you can just reach in there with your fingertips and spin that out. And in this case, we can. Now we're going to use a 17mm socket with some extensions and a breaker bar. There's a bolt right here, and then there's one right on the other side of it. We're going to go ahead and loosen those. Gonna feed down behind the ECU. All right, we got it to start moving. Just make sure that's good. And with that broken free, we're going to go ahead and move to the back one. We have the extensions pushed down behind between the brake fluid reservoir. And we're going to go ahead and loosen that back bolt. All right, the back bolt is now free and spinning. We're just going to pop a ratchet onto that right now. We're going to go ahead and use our drill here. Impact gun. There we go. We're able to go ahead and get that bolt out. Move back to the forward bolt. And get that one out. And we have these 3 bolts here. These are all 17 mil, and we're going to go ahead and break those free. We're going to do this one slowly. Just watch for any type of shifting of the transmission. We might have to use that jack to raise it up just a little bit or lower it. We can see this moving a little bit, so we're going to jack up the transmission a little bit more. There we go. With those nuts and bolts removed, we now have a loose transmission mount. So I'm going to try and work this out and around. And at this point here, we can see that we're getting stuck on that stud there. I'm going to go ahead and lower the transmission a little bit. So we try to remove that mount even though we lowered the transmission. We still struggled a little bit. To make it easier, we're going to go ahead and remove the other 2 14mm bolts from this triangular mounting panel. And this should allow us to get that mount out. This last bolt was being pretty much a bugger to get out, so we just switched over to a 1/2-inch drive socket, breaker bar and extension, just to break that free like so. I'm going to switch back over to our impact and zip that out the rest of the way. Now with that panel loose, we'll go ahead and pull that out and set that aside. go ahead and grab that mount, see if we can manipulate this out without that bracket on there. I have to lower that transmission just a little bit more. Once we get it past that brake line, we can go ahead and pull that out. I'm going to take the new mount and just reverse that procedure. Just work that mount underneath that brake line. Move that back over into position like so. I'm going to go ahead and jack up that transmission a little bit. Looks like everything lines up nice. I'm going to go ahead and get this triangular mount reinstalled. We're just going to get those bolts started. We're not going to tighten them down yet. There we go, get one started, and just repeat for the other two. Okay, we have all three of those bolts in. Next, we're going to go ahead and install these two bolts and that third nut there. All right, so we did apply a little bit of anti-seize compound to that stud right there. I'm going to spin that nut on down. We did apply some anti-seize to the bolts as well. Lastly, we want to go ahead and get the two base mounted bolts put in and apply a little bit of anti-seize compound to those as well. You try and get that started by hand. If you can't start by hand, you can put the extension with the socket down in there. I'm able to get my fingers in there, so that helps out. That started. We're going to go ahead and try and get that back one put in. This one is a little bit tougher to do. Actually, it's a lot tougher to do. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this in there. And we're going to tighten this up with the impact gun. And repeat for the back. All right, now that we got that back bolt started, I'm going to go ahead and tighten that one up with the impact. I'm going to go ahead and jack up the transmission. You can see right where that lines up just before that mount starts to move. So let's go ahead and do that one more time so you can see that. I'm going to slowly jack it up and see this gap here close. Just as it touches it, that's where we want to tighten it. Next, we'll tighten up the 3 14mm bolts on that triangular mounting panel. I'm going to go ahead and use our impact gun to tighten up these 2 forward mounted 14 bolts. And then we'll have to get our ratchet wrench in there to tighten that one up. And we're going to go ahead and torque the 3 14mm bolts to 28 foot-pounds. Now these two 17mm base bolts, those are going to be torqued to 47 foot-pounds. Repeat that for the back one. Now these 3 17mm, these 2 bolts and this nut, there is no torque spec. We just want to make sure that these are tight. Now at this point here, we can go ahead and lower the jack down. And remove the jack. Let's go ahead and reinstall the air filter box base here. Okay, once we have this in the general area, we'll be able to go ahead and slide the air intake tube onto the box. At the same time, we want to go ahead and get this metal tube onto the intake tube as well. Kind of a twofer. Get that put in. I'm going to take a little bit of persuading here to get this lined up. All right, now that we have these 2 tubes lined up in the general area, let's go ahead and kind of drop this down into place. I want to make sure that that rubber grommet Pops onto that metal stud there. Make sure that these two pieces are joined properly up top. Let's go ahead and get our air filter back in there. Again, drop that filter down inside. Now at this point here, I'm going to go ahead and tighten up this clamp. You won't be able to get to this clamp bolt here with the air box on the top. So we're going to simply grab our Phillips head screwdriver and we're going to go ahead and tighten up this clamp. And you see that rotated on us a little bit. So I'm going to try and bring that back. If it has rotated on you, you can go ahead and grab a pick. Reach down in there and just grab that clamp and spin it around just like that. Use a one hand to hold it in position. Go ahead and tighten up that clamp. All right, let's go ahead and install the upper part of the air box there. Grab the box. You want to go ahead and get this part of the upper portion on the rubber boot. Push it straight back. The box top should snap on. Let's go ahead and get these bolts on the front portion and that back bolt. Let's now go ahead and install the two air box intake bolts. There's one in that back here. I'm going to work our way back here and get that installed and get it started a few threads. Let's go ahead and get the front bolt on. And we're just going to go ahead and snug those down. And repeat for the back bolt. Let's go ahead and connect this lower air intake tube. Now with the ECU in place, let's go ahead and get the 3 bolts installed. Get these threaded in. And then we'll go ahead and get these tightened up. Let's go ahead and put this together, get the harness clipped into the top, and install, and you hear it click when it's locked into place. Let's go ahead and lower down our battery tray here. Which might go in a little bit better this way. And we'll go ahead and get our battery installed. Go ahead and we're going to put our J bolts down. There's one on each side, hooks there, and one on the other side. Once that J bolt is hooked, we'll go ahead and tighten these bolts up. So both of them hooked, you can pull up a little bit on that handle. I'm going to go ahead and snug these down. You just want to snug it up so that handle doesn't have any slack left in it. And there we go. Now let's go ahead and get the terminals hooked up. Get your negative on there, pop the positive on. And then we're just going to use our 10mm wrench to go ahead and snug these up.